Hello, friends, and welcome to the Homewrecker podcast, where we attempt to wreck and shatter conventional wisdom and ways of thinking by bringing alternative viewpoints to different subjects in an attempt to not only change the thoughts and feelings most people accept as reality, but to obliterate them completely. I'm your host, former professional wrestler, the Golden Greek Alex Sarion, and I'm joined as always by my wife, the beautiful, gorgeous, amazing, certified hypnotherapist, the lovely Monique. Monique, how are you?
I am just spectacular. Thank you.
Spectacular. There's an adjective.
Yeah.
I like it.
Yes, I am spectacular. Thank you.
Terrific.
Yeah. How are you, my love?
I'm doing fantastic as
All
always.
right.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. What is new with you? What's going on? Anything new, fun, exciting?
Well, on the night we are recording this, as of tomorrow, I will be another year older.
So you're going to be 28?
Yes.
Nice.
Yes.
Great.
28. Nope. I'm gonna be still double digits of a number.
Yes, you will be double digits.
Somewhere between
double digits of a
anyone
number.
who's like really listened to our show. I've said like stuff came out the year I was born. I mean, it's pretty easy to figure out how old I am.
Yeah, whatever.
Yeah.
It's not, you know what? The number, what's it called? The chronological number of your age. Who cares?
Well, I don't.
It doesn't matter. It's all how you feel.
Yeah, I don't care. I'm not.
So whatever.
No,
it doesn't matter.
I don't care. I actually, since I was younger, I've always kind of looked forward to being older. So it's
Really?
like,
Why is that?
Well, because I've mentioned it on the show before that when I was younger, I got so sick of everyone saying, like, oh, you're young, you'll learn. And I was like, I can't wait till I'm older so people can't say that to me.
So now you can say it to younger people. When you're old, you'll learn. Or when you're older, you'll learn. Or you're young, you'll learn. Whatever the
thought
saying
it
is.
with some things like, they're just kind of going on their own path and they'll get to where they need to go to, I'm sure. But it's just that kind of condescending way of saying it to people. Like, there's no need for that.
I'm I don't know if unique is the word or what the word is, but from a young age, I've always been very, and I don't think anybody ever instilled this in me, but I always was very respectful of my elders. And it was just kind of one of those things where I always liked being around people older than me.
Mm-hmm.
All of my friends were always older than me, for example. And then I always liked when I would sit with older relatives, for example, or when my dad owned a restaurant, I would like to sit with some of the older regulars and just talk with them and have conversations with them. And it was always, I always felt like I could learn from people older than me. For whatever reason, it always just clicked with me that I should probably pay attention to these people because they know more than me. They know, they can give me life advice, for example, or I could learn from maybe their life experiences and stuff. So I never really got that when you're older, you'll know, you're just young. I didn't really get that much.
Yeah.
But I don't know.
I got it from like when I'm working somewhere. So like I was young as a manager, and when I wouldn't give people what they wanted, so I wouldn't take the refund, I wouldn't give them a discount. That's when they throw that shit at me. And it's just like,
so
who the
ridiculous.
fuck are you?
So ridiculous.
Yeah, but it's just like, I don't want to hear that shit. But I was the same way. I always liked hanging out with the adults when I was a kid, but it was more so I just found them so interesting.
Yeah.
Not so much like, oh, they know more, I'm going to learn. It was just like, they're interesting.
I guess that's probably why I hung out with them too, because I just figured they're more interesting. I liked hearing more of their type of stories. And usually, like a lot of kids my age weren't into the same things I was into. I was always into not the usual stuff that most kids were into. So I guess that kind of makes sense that we gravitated towards people who were older than us.
Mm-hmm. But yeah, so tomorrow is my birthday as we record this. Once this episode comes out, it'll be past my birthday. However,
well, happy birthday the day before.
For my birthday, I wanted to do something because I like to give. I'm a giver.
Okay.
I'm not, you know me, I'm not big on celebrating my birthday. I don't make a big deal of it, but I thought what would be a really cool thing to do?
That's why we're perfect for each other.
I'm like, I'm going to put a sale on my website, tarotbymonique.com, and in my Etsy shop, Wonders by Monique, all my dragon organite. I'm putting on sale 15% off.
Those are nice too.
Thank you. Because I love my connection I have with the dragons. And I thought having that kind of connection is very amazing. And my friends who have that as well, I know how much they appreciate it. And I don't know, I just want to try to offer that to other people. So if it's a little bit too much for some people, I'm putting it on sale, bringing it down before the holidays. Treat yourself.
All right. So where can people
And
find
get a
it?
dragon. I already said tarotbymonique.com and
Beautiful.
Etsy Wonders by Monique. But
Beautiful.
I'm also doing,
I just wanted you to say it again. That's all.
okay. When you buy a dragon organite, you also get a free dragon oracle reading. So I'll pull a card. So I look to find out what dragon is most connected with you right now. And I think that's really cool too. So you still get that. So you get a discount and a free reading. Happy birthday to me
All right.
equals savings for you.
Check that out. There you go. Very cool. Do I get some plugs out of the way?
Yes.
All right. So if you want to find us on social media, we are on Twitter.
At Homewrecker Pod.
We also have a website.
Homewreckerpodcast.com.
And that's it as far as social media and our website. And of course, when you go on the website, you can check out cool Homewrecker podcast merchandise, like these mugs that we're drinking from right now, if you're watching. And
stickers, fanny packs, hoodies, t-shirts, tank tops,
all that stuff.
All that good stuff.
Check it out. You can help support the show and then just show your love for the Homewrecker podcast. And if you haven't already, hit the subscribe button if you're listening and watching. And again, don't forget to hit the like button, leave us a 5-star review if you don't mind. And you know, if you're so inclined, if you want to leave us a couple of kind words, we'd also appreciate that as well. And as far as social media and people finding you and your online presence, my lady, go.
You can go to my website, tarotbymonique.com, or my Etsy shop, Wonders by Monique, if you're interested in organite. 15% off dragons. I also have incense, candles, protection bags, crystals, all sorts of good stuff. And I do tarot and oracle readings. You can also find me on Twitter at _Monique Giselle. Or if you're interested in hypnotherapy, find me on Twitter at _Monique PCH. I'm sorry, not underscore, just at Monique PCHT. And my website, innerstandingshypnosis.com. If you're interested in hypnotherapy, schedule a free 20-minute consult. And if you sign up for my email list, you get 20% off your first appointment. And you, my love?
You can find me on Twitter at @AlexArion, and you can check out alexarionfitness.com.
Yeah.
With that, want to get into the show?
No, I just want to say, if you're listening, you can watch us. Be a watcher. Find us on YouTube and Brighteon. Okay, now we can get into it.
Ready to get into the show?
Let's do it.
All right. Let's rock and roll. So this week, we're going to talk about something. Should be an interesting show. We're going to be talking about Chris Benoit and the Chris Benoit tragedy, I guess you could call it, that occurred back in 2007 when, and I'm going to say this, and it may rub some people the wrong way. Some people may question why I'm saying it this way, but hopefully after we're done this show, you'll know why. That is when Chris Benoit in 2007 allegedly murdered his wife, his 7-year-old son, and then killed himself. So we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about what happened, what a lot of the inconsistencies were, what some of the theories are behind why this happened, and we'll give our thoughts as well. Should make for interesting conversation, shall we say.
Hopefully.
So, all right. So now, can you remember, before we get into it, we talked briefly before the show started, and I asked you, do you remember the first time you watched Chris Benoit wrestle? And you said, I never watched him wrestle. And I said, okay, go
I
ahead.
thought you meant like when you first, like when I was younger, like back.
Yeah, like before
I wasn't.
before the murders and
I
all that
wasn't really
happened.
watching WWE back then. I mean, if I did, it would be here and there. So it wasn't until after we were together.
Okay, which was after 2007.
Yes.
All right.
And I'm just like, wait a minute, who's this guy? He's banned. Like, what's going on? I kind of had
He's
heard of
banned.
it.
That was the
Not
first
he's
heard
banned.
of him.
He's banned. He's like they blacklisted him. They like removed all of his.
But that's the first time you heard of him was because of that, not
No,
because of what happened.
No, because he like killed his family.
Okay,
but it was like, okay, he's alleged. Everyone says what a great wrestler he was, but I never saw him wrestle, so I didn't know what the big deal was until after we got together, and then I watched some of his matches.
Gotcha. Okay, and that I mean, regardless of what happened at the end of his life, he was a fantastic wrestler. That can never be taken. I mean, they've taken it away from him. Is when I say they, I mean the WWE, because they've essentially erased all of. They never mention him anymore on their TV. They removed most of his any mentions of him on their website and things like that. I think there's like a ban on talent even mentioning his name or talking about him on their television programs. Just it's completely understandable, I guess, because of what he allegedly did. And I say allegedly with all that because nobody knows what happened. Still to this day, his closest friends, family, they have an accepted story and an accepted version of events, but nobody still really knows why it happened, if it happened that way, or if that's even what happened, because there's still so many questions that remain. And a lot of that has to do with the amount of differing information that's available out there regarding this topic. And I have a couple of theories as to why that is.
Yeah, there's like a million different versions.
There's so many different versions of details, of timeline, of events. There's just so much different information out there. And even different official, quote, I'm putting my fingers up, official sources have differing details and information. So it's just, it's not too difficult to see why there's no real, I shouldn't say no real answers, because we have, like I said, the accepted version of events, but why people question the official story, because there's so much differing information out there.
Yeah, we just want to look at all different angles of it. And
yeah.
Like, yeah.
No pun intended for those people out there using the term angle in wrestling. It's probably going to go over everybody's head, but anyway, so I remember the first time I saw Chris Benoit was in 1992. I saw him wrestling on a WCW pay-per-view. He was just, I think it was like a one-time thing where he was in for one show or whatever, and he wrestled. I don't even remember who he wrestled, but I remember watching him and going, who is this guy? He's fucking awesome. Because he was just incredible. Anybody that ever saw him wrestle, he was always awesome. And he resembled the Dynamite Kid. He patterned his whole career, his moves, everything, his intensity, all that stuff was patterned after the Dynamite Kid, who was one of my favorite wrestlers growing up. And I immediately saw the resemblance. I was like, this guy's like quick like Dynamite Kid. He's fast. He's even his facial expressions, everything. He looked like Dynamite Kid almost, just like a little bigger. So anyway, that was the first time I saw him. And then I forgot about him because he'd gone to Japan, and he was in Japan primarily until I think 1995 or 1996 when he came back and was in WCW for several years. And then finally went to the WWF in, I want to say it was 2000. And that's where he went on to become the champion and do what he did and had great matches with all their top guys and stuff. And then, of course, in 2007, he died and did what he did, allegedly. So, yeah. So you never saw him. I actually met him one time.
Oh, really?
Well, a couple of times backstage at WWF at the time events when I was there working. And he very quiet, very intense. And I think I told you the other night, he was huge.
Yeah, you said that.
Huge. He was not tall. He wasn't a tall guy. He was like 5'10", 5'11". He was under 6 feet. but just massive, just massive. I was standing, I went and I stood next to him because I couldn't, it was very strange, like not strange, but I was very awestruck by how big he was, by how massive he was. He was just all like thick, solid muscle. And he was wearing a black t-shirt, whatever his shirt was at the time. And he was just standing like this up against the wall, chewing on one of those like coffee straws, which I apparently come to find out was something he always did. And he was just very intense. And I just went up and introduced myself. Hey, how you doing? I'm Alex. Nice to meet you. And he's like, oh, nice to meet you. Just very like quick, brief. And that was it. That, whatever, you know, but I just saw him walking around a lot and that he was always chewing on that straw. And he always had like this just intense, like not mean, but like all business kind of face. Like didn't see him smile or anything like that. But
And what year was that?
it was in 2001.
Okay.
But anyway, so that was that. So I can say I met him. I stood next to him and sized him up, I guess you could say. And he was huge. Yeah, he was just massive, just a big dude. And I guess he was only 220 pounds, but he seemed a lot bigger to me. I mean, at the time I was like 205, 210, and I'm 5'6", so I'm not tall, obviously. And just standing next to him, though, I was like, holy shit, this guy's. I find it very, very hard to believe he was only 10 pounds heavier than I was at the time, is what I'm saying. So anyway, all right. So what happened? Let's get into the what happened. So on Sunday, June 24th, 2007. Oh, this is not right.
Did I have something wrong? Did I type up something wrong?
Yeah, you typed it. It was supposed to be Monday.
Oh, Monday.
I'm reading the notes here that we have.
I read it to you and you said it was
the
good.
The inconsistencies. There we go. They're from us now, apparently, not just the internet and everything else, but us. You. You know, the date was correct. Just the day was wrong.
Okay, so it was Monday. Okay.
Yes, Sunday, June 23rd was a pay-per-view event. Okay, this is when I first got the hint, I guess, that something was weird. That something weird was going on. That the Sunday, June 23rd, the WWF or WWE by that point had a pay-per-view event called Vengeance, and one of the matches that was scheduled that night was a match I was really looking forward to. Was CM Punk, who was the ECW champion at the time, was defending the title against Chris Benoit. And to my knowledge, they'd never wrestled before, and I was not a fan of CM Punk. So I was kind of looking forward to him being in the ring with Chris Benoit, because Benoit was a real rough, tough, intense wrestler. And I was kind of looking forward to watching him chop CM Punk. That was my thing at the time. And I was, I was in the wrestling business at the time. The few times I'd met CM Punk weren't bad interactions, but I just wasn't like, he just kind of rubbed me the wrong way. Nothing bad, just kind of one of those, like, I felt like he had an ego and it was not really deserved at the time, I thought. But whatever. Anyway, regardless, that was my first. Go ahead.
No, it's funny. Just speaking of CM Punk, when I first saw him, like, yeah, he's not bad. Oh, is he really a punk rocker? And I just always wondered, I wonder if he likes Screeching Weasel. That was like my curiosity, because they're an awesome punk rock band, but not everybody really likes them.
I'm going to sound like a dick by saying I didn't like him, but it wasn't that I didn't like him. He just let's put it this way. The first time I met him, I said, hey, what's up, man? How you doing? I'm Alex. Nice to meet you. He's like, Mr. Arion. And that was it. And I was like, looking at him like, yes, Alex is fine. And he just kind of walked away. And I'm like,
so you said Alex, but he knew your name.
Said, he knew who I was, apparently. Okay.
Do you think he was just trying to be fun?
I don't know, because he walked away.
Oh.
And that was it. And I'm like, it was kind of a strange interaction.
Maybe he was trying to be mysterious.
Okay, whatever. This was in like 2000.
I know.
When I first met him, it's like, what? And I didn't know who he was. I'd never heard the name or anything at that point. And the next time I met him, same thing. I was like, hey, what's up, man? How's it going? I'm Alex. We'd met previously, briefly, but nice to meet you again. He's like, Mr. Arion.
Maybe
and
that's
he walked away, and I'm like, Okay. See you, dude. Whatever. But anyway, from those two brief interactions, I was like, oh, Benoit's gonna light him up with those chops. Can't wait to see it. Whatever.
It didn't
Just
happen.
so I knew something was going on because I think it was I want to say, if I remember correctly, I've not gone back and watched it since 2007, but I want to say that at the beginning of the show, they said something like Chris Benoit is going to be unavailable tonight or something. He's dealing with a family emergency, something. So he's not going to be on the show tonight. So instead we have a replacement, and whoever the replacement was. So I didn't get to see the match, but I figured, well, that's weird. Benoit's not there. That's very strange because he didn't have a reputation of a guy who missed shows. Always, the ultimate consummate professional, if you will. So I thought that was odd. And then I remember the next day, Steve, my friend Steve, had been in touch with some people at WWE. And he told me there's something up with Benoit. And I said, what do you mean? Like, what's going on? And he just said, I don't know. There's something going on. So I knew, okay, something's up. We don't know what, but something's up. It wasn't till about 6 o'clock that night, that Monday on June the 24th, that the news had broke. I can't remember where I first saw it. I may have even got a text message from Steve that Benoit, his wife, and his son were found dead in their home. And I was like, holy shit. You fucking really? What? And the first thing, I remember calling and talking with him on the phone after that. And the first thing we both were saying must have been carbon monoxide poisoning or something must have happened, because that's crazy. The whole family, and that was without knowing anything or seeing anything, our first initial reaction. That was us. Steve knew Benoit. He'd been in the WWF for several years and knew him. They were not close or anything, but he knew him, had interactions with him, always said he was just a normal dude, intense guy, but whatever. So yeah, it was just seemed very, very strange. And we were obviously upset because that sucks. The guy was awesome as far as a wrestler goes. But anyway, so that was the first time I got word of it. And then I started texting people that I knew, friends of mine, like, fuck, I remember specifically saying, say a prayer for Chris Benoit and his family. Rest in peace, Chris Benoit. He was just found dead with his wife and son. Nobody knows what happened yet. Whatever. Something along those lines. But I remember that specific line, say a prayer for Chris Benoit and his family. So a couple hours go by and Monday Night Raw's that night. And they were I remember the thing was the previous week, they'd done some storyline where Vince McMahon died. Like his limo blew up or something like that.
Oh, yeah.
Do you remember that?
Hearing about that. Yeah.
Okay. So Raw opens with Vince McMahon standing in the ring, and it's an empty arena. So they didn't let fans in. I guess they refunded tickets or something. And Vince went on to say that they're going to do a 3-hour tribute. He said, that Benoit and his family were found dead. Nobody knew details, whatever. And they're going to spend the next 3 hours doing a tribute. And essentially what they did was WWF had put out a home video, a DVD of Chris Benoit's career kind of thing in 2004. And they had a bunch of his matches. They did like a documentary style thing. They basically played that video over 3 hours with wrestlers doing interviews and talking about Chris and stuff like that, interspersed throughout the show. So that's what they did for the 3 hours. So I sat, I watched it and saw a couple people on there that were really emotional and crying. And it was sad because at that point, all of us, the public, and most, I would think, of the wrestlers who were crying and emotional and giving glowing personal testimonials of Benoit and his family and interactions they had with his wife and kids. You're emotional. You're thinking, wow, this is really sad. And nobody knows obviously what happened. And to my knowledge, like my circle of friends and everything, nobody's thinking murder, suicide. that had never crossed anybody's mind. Nobody even brought it up as like a possibility. It was all carbon monoxide. Did somebody break in and kill them? Like, what happened? It was that kind of thing. It was never what the official story ended up being. That never crossed anybody's mind. But again, we are just people that maybe briefly met him once or twice, or knew of him in passing, or just knew of him from what you saw on television from a performer aspect.
And when you don't always know the story, the most you can do is speculate. That's all you can do.
That's true.
You don't know.
Absolutely.
And we see media do it all the time. They have no idea what's going on. They just speculate and they throw shit out there and say, oh, it could be this. Well, it could be anything.
Yeah.
We don't know until we know.
That's true. Yeah.
And sometimes we don't ever find out. So why don't we talk just a quick history about Chris Benoit with wrestling?
I kind of briefly went into it. He started in Calgary. From all accounts, the only job he ever had in his life was a professional wrestler. His dad built him a weight bench and got him weights when he was 13 or 14 years old. He became a workout fanatic. He idolized the Dynamite Kid growing up, wanted to be just like him. So emulated him, like all of his moves and everything else, wanted to look like him. So he worked out, apparently, from just different stories I've heard. Obviously can't corroborate it in any way, but the hearsay is that he got on, started using steroids at a young age to get bigger, because he was of small stature. He wasn't a big kid. So he started working out, eventually got into steroids, which back then in the mid 80s were kind of it was a normal thing.
And they were legal.
And they were legal at the time. Yeah. But apparently he continued using them throughout his life, like till the end of his life. But he was just a very intense wrestler. He was good right off the bat. Essentially, he was by all accounts, he wasn't trained officially. I don't think. I couldn't find anywhere. I did try and look and see who he was officially trained by, and there was no official trainer of him. I don't know if he was showing up at matches and I really don't know the early part of his career that well, but I know he did start wrestling in Calgary. And initially, I believe he was part of a tag team. I think that's how he first broke in. And he was tagging up with a guy named Biff Wellington, was his tag team partner's name. And we'll get into him a little bit later as well, because there's some weird coincidences with both of their lives and the end of their lives. From there, he went on. Like I said, he had that brief stint in WCW. I don't know if it was just the one pay-per-view match and some TV matches. I only saw the one pay-per-view match, and then he just vanished. For me, from my perspective, I never saw him again. But at that point, it's because he was wrestling in Japan. And in Japan is where he really made a international name for himself as the Pegasus Kid. And then he was wrestling under a mask at first. And then I think he lost like a mask match or something. So he had to take off his mask, and then he was the Wild Pegasus was his wrestling name there. So there is where he met Eddie Guerrero. And Eddie Guerrero at the time was wrestling as Black Tiger, also under a mask. And they had a bunch of matches back and forth there. And that's where they first met each other and started to kind of form a friendship. From there, they went to ECW and were also wrestling in Japan. So they were kind of going back and forth between the two promotions. And I believe, like I said, 1995 or early 1996 is when they, along with Dean Malenko, went to WCW. And they were there for about 4 years at that point.
And then they went to
WWF. Yeah,
WWF at the time.
Right. And they all went at the same time. Now, when they were in WCW, Chris Benoit ended up wrestling with Kevin Sullivan, who was the booker at the time. And the booker in professional wrestling is the guy who comes up with storylines. He puts together the feuds, comes up with what in wrestling they call angles. And he paired himself up with Chris Benoit. And Kevin Sullivan was married to Nancy, who would later be Chris Benoit's wife. She was married to Kevin Sullivan at the time. And Kevin Sullivan put together a storyline where her wrestling name was Woman. She was just a female
Wasn't it like
manager,
Angel or
valet.
something at first, and then it got changed to woman?
That was
Yeah.
her earlier career.
Yeah, but she,
But
I
at
mean,
this
she had a
point in
history
time-
in wrestling.
Yeah, she was also in wrestling too. She started in the early 80s in Florida Championship Wrestling with Kevin Sullivan as his valet. And Kevin Sullivan at the time was doing what was his name now? Oh my goodness, I can't remember. But he was a devil worshiper. That was his gimmick. He was not in real life. In real life, he's not a devil worshiper. He wasn't into Satan or anything like that. It was a gimmick for pro wrestling. That's all it was. And she was the fallen angel, was her.
That's it, fallen angel.
Yeah, that's what. And then
that was her thing.
Right. And then later they went to WCW in the late 80s together, and she became woman.
Mm-hmm.
She first came in actually as like a nerdy girl. Her what was her name? She was with Rick Steiner of all people. She was like a nerdy girl, and I think her name was like Robin Green or something like that. And she turned on Rick Steiner and took off all the nerd stuff and became woman. That was her name, woman. And she was just like a badass female manager. So anyway, she was married to Kevin Sullivan this whole time, or she was with him this whole time. They ended up getting married, whatever the case. But anyway, she was still in WCW at the time when Benoit was there. And Kevin Sullivan wrote a storyline, booked an angle where woman went with Chris Benoit. Essentially, what happened was, well, nobody, I don't know what happened, but apparently from all accounts, they were hanging out a lot together because they wanted to get the storyline over, meaning they wanted the public to believe the storyline was real. And at the time is when the internet was starting to really become a thing and really started to get like a lot of internet wrestling smart fans is what they called them at the time, smart marks. The inside workings of the wrestling business were becoming more exposed. So they were trying to go to great lengths to really get the believability over. And that's what they did. They would, instead of just doing stuff on TV, they would go to the hotel together. They would be renting cars together. They'd, take flights together, that kind of thing, go out to eat together,
So if anyone
that kind of thing. So if anybody
like,
saw them,
yeah,
exactly, they were trying to make it look believable and real. Keeping up kayfabe essentially is what they were doing, but they were doing it everywhere, not just around the buildings and stuff. So essentially what is theorized happened is that they ended up just falling in love. It happens, but the joke around wrestling was that Kevin Sullivan booked his own divorce.
And there were also rumors. I mean, it was addressed. We watched The Dark Side of the Ring, and where they talked about it, and Nancy said that Kevin was abusive.
He's refuted that.
Yeah,
but
I'm just saying this is what was one
what
side.
was alleged.
Yes,
right.
It was alleged that he was abusive and that Chris was the one helping her and taking care of her. So one could even say that is what brought them together. You have this guy seeing a woman he works with who he cares about. They're friends, and she's in a bad position. And as a gentleman, as a good guy, somebody you care about, you want to take care of them. And that's kind of how it almost seems like, maybe, like, you never know. I'm just saying there's so many different angles with this, and there's so much that we don't really know.
Right. And also at the time that they got together, either Chris was going through a divorce or was still married and then maybe got to, I'm unsure of the timeline. Again, I didn't know him personally or anything, a lot of those details. Only what I'd heard through hearsay, so I can't say for sure. But Benoit was married. Nancy was married. I don't know if they were on the outs with their respective spouses at the time, but they ended up getting together. And the rest is history, I guess, you could say. So we actually did a watch along of one of the Kevin Sullivan, Chris Benoit matches, because they had a series of matches together that were really intense and hard hitting. And the actual match that you and I watched for the watch along here for our hearers was Bash at the Beach 1997, where they got into a real tense exchange where Benoit actually punched Sullivan so hard in the ear that he ruptured his eardrum. So apparently after that particular match, the fight continued for real now when they got backstage. And when they got backstage, Nancy's sister was actually in the crowd, sitting in the crowd with Kevin Sullivan's daughter, watching the match. She was called to the back by one of the WCW agents. She got to the back and saw them fighting for real, but they were getting pulled apart, but they were fighting. There's no cameras around. They were actually really going at each other. And Chris grabbed her and said, "You're coming with me." And Kevin Sullivan was like, "No, you're coming with me. What are you doing? Why are you going? You're coming, come with me." And apparently Chris called Nancy on the phone, gave the cell phone to her sister, and said, and Nancy said to her sister, "Don't go with Kevin, go with Chris, whatever." And then the way Sandra tells the story, I heard her, she was on Chris Jericho's podcast. She said, "Whatever my sister said was gold to me. So I listened and I went with Chris." And to hear her tell the story, she never saw any abuse by Kevin, but was told by her sister that there was. So again, we were not there. We don't know.
So again, the information that we share is just the different variations of what we found. There's many different stories. So we're just trying to go over everything that we found.
Yeah. Just giving some brief history, if we can, of these people that's available, stuff that we know anyway.
Yeah.
So where was I now? Okay, so yes, Bash at the Beach. So we watched the Bash at the Beach. So anyway,
so how Nancy and Chris met.
How they got together. Started as a wrestling storyline of, what's the word I'm looking for?
Became real.
It merged. Why can't I think of the damn word?
I don't know. It materialized.
Thank you. Materialized into something real. It metamorphosized into something real. Yeah. Anyway. Wow, I'm going to edit the shit out of this one. Holy cow.
So, as we've said, there's a lot of different stories with what happened. And there's a lot.
Well, the history, we're still going through the history of Benoit.
Okay.
Right? So, Benoit from there gets upset with his push. What a push is in wrestling is the way you are positioned on a wrestling card, whether or not you're in prominent storylines, whether or not you're a champion or in championship matches, that kind of thing. He was upset with his push. Kevin Sullivan had become the booker again of the promotion when Benoit and his friends, Dean Malenko, Perry Saturn, and Eddie Guerrero, they were sticking together. If Kevin Sullivan was rumored to be coming back as booker, they wanted out because they thought for sure, because they're friends with Chris and because of Chris and Nancy now being an item and being together in real life, that they're going to be buried essentially in the show. And so they decided they were all going to quit and go to the WWF together. Funnily enough, the very night that Kevin Sullivan became the booker of WCW, he made Chris Benoit the world heavyweight champion. He did the opposite of what anybody thought he would do, but they still quit anyway. Chris Benoit was the WCW heavyweight champion for one night, and he quit the next day, and they showed up on Monday Night Raw. So from there, he had a great career in the WWF, became the WWF champion in 2004, held the title for several months, and then was just always in the mix, always one of the top guys, always wrestling with the top wrestlers and everything until 2007 when he passed away. So that's his history.
All right.
Brief as I can make it for people that are not aware of who he is. So what happened? Well, that's still a mystery, but his body was discovered on June 24th, Monday, in the afternoon. Apparently what happened was he had missed a WWF house show event on that previous Saturday. They were scheduled to be in Beaumont, Texas. It was a house show, which is a non-televised event. So just to show where there's people in the crowd and no cameras, essentially. He missed the event, which is very uncharacteristic of him, but he told his friends and the WWF office personnel that his family had food poisoning and he wasn't going to make the event. The following day was the pay-per-view event. So when he missed that pay-per-view event, obviously there's going to be some red flags. But again, people just thought that he was dealing with sick family because that's what he had told people. Apparently the morning of that pay-per-view, that Sunday morning at about 3:30 or 4 o'clock in the morning, he had sent out text messages to two of his friends in the WWE, one of them being Chavo Guerrero Jr., the other one being Scott Armstrong, who was a referee, a former wrestler who became a referee. And they were the identical text messages to both of them. One of them was giving his physical address, and the other text message was saying that the dogs are in the backyard, the garage is unlocked, or they're in the back fenced yard,
Yeah.
or
Like they're basically like locked up, kind of.
right, and
Yeah.
and that the garage door is unlocked. So essentially, giving his physical location, which some people may think is weird, but it's only because a lot of people didn't know his physical address. He had recently moved to that house because he had lived in a more public area, and he had become obsessed with being very private. He essentially, when he became the WWF champion in 2004, he didn't have any it was impossible for him to go out in public, essentially. And especially where he lived on a very public street in Georgia. So he moved to this gated community, got a nice piece of property, about 8 acres, and did not have a physical address. He didn't tell anybody his physical address. He had a P.O. box. So nobody knew his actual physical address except for like a few close family and friends. He didn't tell anybody where he lived. So the fact that he texted these people the address, I would think would be a red flag personally if I got that text message. But anyway, so he texts these people and they didn't tell anybody that day, which I think was kind of strange. Why would you not say anything? But later on, they would say, well, they were covering for him because they figured he's got something going on at home, at whatever. The following day, the Monday, is when, again, his body was found.
And I guess I just want to say, like, if you get a message like that, you still want to cover for him, but why wouldn't you call him?
He was called.
He was.
He was called.
Okay, so he was called.
They'd called. They started texting with him. Yes, that did happen, but he was not. He did not answer. Now he did speak. Like I said, he was in contact with people over the weekend. He had a couple of conversations with Chavo Guerrero, who was his riding partner for the previous 8 months, and they were road wives. And what that means is they would travel together. They would oftentimes room together in hotels. They'd go to the gym together. They'd go out to eat together. They were, they were always essentially together while they were on the road. And at the time, the WWF schedule was 4 days a week. So they'd be on the road 4 days a week, and then they'd be home for 3 and then back out. But you're really not home for 3. You're wrestling 4 days a week, and then you're probably traveling one of those other days. You're really only home for like a day and a half, and then you're getting ready to travel and traveling, So anyway, they were together a lot more with each other than they were their own families. So
he sends the text messages.
So he sends those text messages anyway, and then nothing came of it. They didn't tell anybody until that Monday. And what happened was, when they finally told the WWF officials, the front office, whoever they told, that's when they said, okay, something's up. And they sent, apparently the WWE had a contract with a security company, and they had a representative from that security company go to the Benoit house. But the gate, again, he had a gate, so you couldn't go up to the house unless you had a code or were buzzed in. And this person saw the dogs who were barking and couldn't get in. So he called the police and asked for a welfare check. That's essentially how it went down. And that was in the Dark Side of the Ring documentary.
Yep.
Actually had the 911 call and everything, or the dispatch call, whatever it was. So at that point, the pair of detectives arrived, and what happened was they found out that the neighbor, they went to the neighbor's house. They went to the neighbor's house because apparently, from talking to the security person, talked to different people within the WWE organization. I don't know if it was front office personnel or wrestlers or whoever, but they said that the neighbor oftentimes would watch the dogs for Chris and Nancy when they were out of town. So with that information, the police went to the neighbor's house. The neighbor happened to be home, and they asked her to come. Could you please come? We're trying to do a welfare check. And the neighbor's like, oh, yeah, I haven't seen or talked to them in a couple of days. Something, well, I don't know what's going on, but yeah, I know the dogs and whatever. So she went, hopped the fence, went with the dogs, took the dogs, put them outside or inside or wherever. She separated the dogs.
She went to go bring the dogs inside.
Whatever it was.
Yeah.
And then that's when she was in the house. She discovered the bodies. I think she discovered Daniel's body first and then discovered Nancy's body and then went running outside and got the police. She did not see Chris. She didn't know where he was, but she told the police they're dead. So the police got her out. She went in, and apparently what happened after that, the police were inside for such a long time because they were trying to clear the house. You know, they're trying to make sure there's no one in the house, whatever, any attacker, intruder, whatever. They're clearing the room by room of the house. And the neighbor had called 911 because the police were in there for so long and she didn't hear from them. So she didn't know, is somebody in there that got to the police? Like, what's going on? So the dispatcher called to the police and communicated back that they're okay. But there's transcripts of that call that she had with the dispatcher. And she's saying on the call, they're dead. Like, they killed them. Somebody killed them. They're dead. And she said, I don't know where Chris was. I didn't see him, but I didn't go in the basement for some reason. Her exact words, for some reason, I didn't go in the basement. So she must have had some kind of weird feeling, like, don't go in the basement or something. And turns out that's where Chris was. And he was discovered hanging.
Sorry, that was the cat jumping.
She had discovered him, or he was discovered, hanging from his lat pull down machine in his home gym. Apparently had hung himself. And he was, there was a half bottle of wine next to him. There was a pair of 10-pound dumbbells down by his side. And there was his cell phone and his wife Nancy's cell phone. And that's the thing. Those text messages, when I said they were sent, those same messages were sent from his phone and from Nancy's phone to both of those wrestlers. So why they were sent from both phones, I don't know. I don't know what the logic was there, what the thinking was there, but that's what happened. So that's what the police discovered. They discovered Daniel, his 7-year-old son, was face down, dead, and Nancy was discovered in a side room, and she was rolled up in like a rug, and her arms were tied behind her back by a coaxial cable, like a cable that you use for cable TV. Her legs were bound by duct tape and coaxial cable, and she had a coaxial cable that was tied going from behind her back up and around her neck, and also with a telephone cord, and that's how she was strangled. And apparently not just strangled, but she was bruised up and beaten up pretty badly, it looked like, according to the report. So that's what they discovered. So they were all dead. Now, if you're looking at, I left out a couple of details there, sorry. Next to Daniel's body, there was a Bible that was placed, a child's Bible, like a child version of a Bible. And next to Nancy's body was also a Bible. So the theory is that he placed Bibles next to his family members after he killed them, but there was no Bible near him. So I don't know what that means, but by all accounts, he was not a religious person, yet he has the Bibles there. So.
Well, in the Dark Side of the Ring, the interviews, it was said that Eddie Guerrero was religious and he gave Chris a Bible.
Yes,
he started getting more religious per se, because he wasn't before. Again, this is just one account.
Yeah, again, that's the thing with this story. there's so many different versions and accounts of the type of person he was, the type of things he was into. I heard a version from somebody that the reason there were, because it wasn't just those two Bibles, there were several Bibles in the house. And the version I heard was the reason there was Bibles in the house, because neither Chris or Nancy were religious, was because they were trying to get their son into a private school, and the private school was a Catholic private school. And so they were I guess what you do when you're trying to get your child into a private school that's religious, you got to show up to some services. You have to act like you're involved or committed. And they were essentially doing it for show, just to get their son into this good school. So they had the Bibles around, but it wasn't something that they really believed or practiced. Again, that's a story I heard. I don't know if it's true or not, but those are the type of stories that are out there. So essentially there was all these Bibles there because they were just trying to keep up appearances to get their kid in a good school. That's a story. Whether or not it's true,
we don't know.
We don't know. But there's also reports of Nancy confiding in her pastor. So if she's not religious, how does she have a pastor she confides in? So there's so many different like conflicting stories with this whole thing that it's impossible to keep track of everything.
Why don't we go into some more of them though?
Sure. So, okay, you want to go into some of these inconsistencies?
Yeah, let's go into some of these inconsistencies.
Okay, one of the things now anybody that remembers this when it occurred, and it was now, what's it been? Almost 15 years. It's going to be 15 years now. Yeah, in 2000 next year will be 15 years. Anybody that was around then that was watching the news, it was impossible to not see something about this whole thing for months after it happened. It was on every cable news show, every cable news talk show had some story about it or something about it. Every supermarket tabloid, it was everywhere for months. So you had all kinds of different details and all kinds of different theories that were out there. Every wrestler from the past was coming out of the woodwork and showing up on these shows and giving their theory as to why Chris did what he did. Because by all accounts, at that point, he was a model employee. He was a fantastic wrestler, a guy who everybody loved universally. People would trust them with their lives. Why would he do this? It doesn't make sense. So everybody's coming out of the woodwork and giving their theories and opinions. Now,
before we start saying what it is, why don't we take a break?
Let's take a quick break and we'll come back and we'll get into some of these theories.
Many people are unaware just how much hypnotherapy can help them, or think it's only to help lose weight or quit smoking. But there is so much more hypnotherapy can do. It can help with stress, anxiety, insomnia, phobias, performance enhancement, connecting with your spirit guides and higher self. You can even discover past lives and your life between lives. Heal traumas, break habits, find your deepest truth, or just have fun discovering who you really are, all from the comfort of your home. I'm Monique Pliakis. I'm a certified hypnotherapist, and I want to help you. Schedule a free consult by going to www.innerstandingshypnosis.com. That's innerstandingshysnosis.com. Innerstandings Hypnosis. Find your power and ignite your inner light.
All right, we're back.
And we're back.
Okay, now we can
now
get into it.
Are we good?
Yeah.
Okay. So one of the theories, or one of the things that came out that is still something people say to this day, is that Daniel had Fragile X syndrome, which apparently is a type of a disability, like a developmental disability that children can get. Totally not true. Completely made up.
And where did that come from?
And now this didn't come from just like some reporter, journalist, or something like that.
It wasn't the National Enquirer.
Wasn't anything like that. This was actually the DA of the county that was investigating this crime. It came from him. He just randomly made a comment at a press conference. Just threw it out there. Where he got this from, who knows? But he threw it out there and everybody ran with it. It was everywhere. I remember reading an article about it in People magazine. It was everywhere that Daniel had Fragile X syndrome and he was being shot up with growth hormone and steroids because Chris wanted him to be bigger and he was undersized and because of this Fragile X syndrome. That was what was being reported in People. Like I said, I saw it on the news. They were talking about it on Nancy Grace, all those kinds of shows. That was out there. Now, again, I listened to Chris Jericho's podcast, as I mentioned before, and he had on the sister of Nancy. Her name was Sandra. Or is Sandra, excuse me. Thank you. And she said that's complete bullshit. It was completely made up. And she was so upset by it that she went to Daniel's pediatrician, got his medical records, took them to the DA, and forced him to make a retraction, to come out publicly and make a retraction saying, I shouldn't have said that. There's no evidence of that. It's completely just something I said. I apologize. There was nothing wrong with the kid because according to Sandra, he was completely normal, completely fine. He was essentially just like Chris, a silent, quiet, very smart, very intelligent, but a normal kid.
Where does the DA get this from? And if the DA is getting this information, which is false and spreading false information, what other false information is he working with? Did they just make assumptions?
That's
Were they
the thing.
given incorrect information? Where did it come from?
To my knowledge, that's never been out there. That's nothing I've ever seen, but by all accounts, his retraction was buried. It was never covered. It was never run with. Nobody ever said, oh, by the way, we were wrong about that. It was just, he did publicly say I was wrong. I apologize, but nobody covered it. That's on page 17.
Well, that's how it always is.
And like on the last page of the newspaper or something, you know what I mean? It's buried. Nobody sees it. So anyway, that's one of the big ones. And that's one that's still reported to this day. I actually, in doing research for the podcast, I listened to it. I went on Apple podcasts and I put in Chris Benoit, and so many podcasts have covered this story and have covered the happenings of that weekend. And I downloaded a couple that I thought looked okay. Maybe this will be good. Maybe it'll get some different perspectives, get some different information that I haven't heard before. And every one of them still acts like this is a thing. Every one of them. And they all do there was track marks in the child's arm from getting injected with steroids and growth hormone. And I'm like, what? That's not,
because that was another rumor. There
that
were
was
rumors
another
that
rumor. Yes.
the son Daniel had track marks in his arm, which if you're injecting with steroids, I didn't think it went into your veins. I thought it went into muscle.
Steroids are not taken intravenously, so there would not be track marks on anybody's arms if they're doing steroids. You take them in their intramuscular injections. So the common way that most people take them is they inject them into their ass, into their glute, because that's the thickest muscle of your body. Now, when bodybuilders, wrestlers, people that abuse or use steroids, when there's a certain amount of scar tissue builds up in your butt cheek, you alternate. You would switch butt cheeks is what they do. And then when it gets too built up in your butt cheeks, you can switch to your thighs, the thick muscle in your thigh. What some guys also would do, they'd inject into their deltoid in the side, but it's always intramuscularly. That's where the injection would be. It would not be in the veins of the forearm because it's not intravenous. You don't pump it into your bloodstream. You pump it into your muscles. That's how you take steroids. But again, that is something that,
and that's what you can learn on Homewrecker podcast is how to take steroids.
But that's something with a quick Google search, anybody doing their due diligence could figure out it's false. It's not true.
And so not just Daniel, but they even said Chris Benoit
had
track marks from steroids.
Yes,
so
that's another story that's out there.
Yeah.
Benoit was found with a bunch of track marks in his arm. He just recently injected steroids. False. False. He did have elevated levels of testosterone cypionate that was found in his urine, but his blood showed his testosterone levels to be normal. So I thought that was strange. Now, that from what my understanding is, testosterone cypionate is a fast acting testosterone, so it's in and out of your body quickly. So that may be why it was found in his urine and not so much in his, in his blood. But I don't know. Now, there was also a lot of wine and beer bottles that were found around the house in the trash cans. And the theory was that he was drunk, that he was just plastered, and he just, that's why he did what he did, and that he continued drinking throughout the weekend. Chris Benoit had a half bottle of wine found near his body in the gym. He had no alcohol in his system, but he did have prescription level amounts of what was the Xanax, I believe was the drug. So those type of mood type of drugs. That's what he had in his system.
But
so
it's interesting that he had no alcohol in his system.
That's correct. So it's
Just
very
bizarre.
It is bizarre. Now, Nancy, on the other hand, she was intoxicated according to the stuff that I saw. She had an elevated blood alcohol content. So was she drinking before she died? Possibly. Or obviously if her blood alcohol was elevated. So
another thing I just want to bring up in terms of like the rumors of, like, about Daniel, wasn't it also rumored he was mentally disabled aside from Fragile X syndrome? That he had mental disabilities there. So it's almost like they just kind of threw out all these things about the child.
It was almost like, and I don't know that this is the case, but I almost feel like people were coming out with these things because if it went down the way they said it went down, people were trying to figure out reasons for Benoit killing his son, because any normal, rational person, even still, cannot fathom, okay, spouses, they get into arguments. You hear about these type of things all the time. And yes, spouses will end up killing each other. It happens. Very rarely do you hear of a parent taking the life of the child, though. That's where people have a hard time. So I wonder if maybe people were coming out with these things to try to figure out and rationalize a way that would maybe justify what he did. I don't know.
And is it more of a coping mechanism for them because it's so difficult to comprehend and in a way accept that somebody would do that to their own child?
That is the only thing I can think of. Because I don't know, but no, there was nothing wrong with the kid. He was completely normal. He seemed
like the spitting image of his father.
If you look at him, exactly. And a lot of people were saying he had mental disabilities because of the way his face looked, because he had like kind of a bigger forehead.
Yeah, but he just looked like his dad.
Just like his father. Yeah. His father had the same thing. Yeah. So he was like a spitting image of his dad. So, take that for what you will. It's just how the kid looked, but he was fine. He was normal. He was completely healthy, very intelligent. From what his aunt said on the Chris Jericho podcast, he was exactly like Chris in his demeanor, in his quietness. He had to get to know you before he warmed up to you, but he had his mother's spunk and sense of humor. So in her words, he would have been the perfect pro wrestler because he would have been just as intense as his dad, but he would have had like his mom's sense of humor and charisma. Exactly.
One of the other things brought up was CTE, chronic traumatic encephalopathy. I don't know if I said it right.
Chronic traumatic encephalopathy. I believe that's how you say it.
I have it written down right in front of me, and I'm still.
It's a mouthful.
So we'll say CTE.
Yeah, CTE for sure.
Yeah. So that was another thing that came out about a possible reason for why this happened.
Yeah. The theory is, the findings were that he had this, his brain was examined. What happened was Chris Nowinski, who is a former professional wrestler, he was in the WWF for a short time. And I say a short time, and he was only there a short time because he gotten several concussions. So he was forced to retire. And after retiring, he decided to look into concussions and look into the effects of concussions and things like that. And actually, he was focusing on NFL players, and that's where he discovered the work of another doctor. And he teamed up with this other doctor. They started doing research together, and they were looking into CTE. And so he was curious about if is Benoit, did he suffer from this? Is that maybe why he committed the acts that he did and why he killed himself? And he also was on the Chris Jericho podcast and told the story of how after he retired from the WWF, he was still there on occasion. He would go to shows. He was still an employee of the company doing public relations and things like that. And he had started writing a book about concussions. And he was actually backstage, and he said the only wrestler that ever showed any interest in his work on concussions was Chris Benoit. And he said that Chris Benoit went up to him and asked him if he could call him and talk to him about concussions and things. He had some questions. And so Nowitzki asked him, have you had a number of concussions, and do you know how many you've had? And Chris said to him, more than I can count. So he said, we should talk. And Benoit said, okay, great. Call me. I'll be home whatever day. We'll talk then. And so Nowitzki did call him when he said he would. And he said Benoit answered the phone, but was very short with him, almost like he had caught him at a bad time. And Benoit said, they talked for a few minutes. And he said that when he called, Benoit almost acted like he had forgotten that Nowitzki said he was going to call him, and then it's like, oh yeah, that's right. Yeah. And then they talked briefly, but he said he had to go. And then that was it. They never talked again. So Nowitzki was theorizing perhaps he knew something was going on with himself, and he could tell something was wrong, but he just didn't know what. And so Nowitzki says he regrets not ever following back up with him because he wonders if maybe he could have helped him in some way. So anyway, he does end up calling his Chris Benoit's father, Michael Benoit. But he said that now this is what I found interesting. He said he waited several days to call and ask to see if he could get Chris's brain to examine it to see if he had CTE, so he could maybe help explain and get some answers and study his brain and see, is this what caused it?
And he did get permission.
He did get permission, but what I just found it interesting. And again, I don't know the science behind any of this. I don't know the specifics, but I found it interesting that he waited several days. So if you're waiting a couple of days, how is the body preserved?
And how is the brain itself?
How is the brain itself being preserved?
Usually bodies, it depends on if they're going to do an autopsy. Usually it's cold storage.
So is the body itself, are the vital organs like the heart, the brain, are those taken out? Or is the whole entire body placed in cold storage? Because how soon after a death is an autopsy performed? Do you know that information by chance?
I'm not sure. I feel like it can vary.
So by all accounts, Benoit had hung himself on a Sunday. So he had been decomposing for a day, at least a day. So you have the body decomposing
in the summer in Georgia.
In the summer in Georgia, right? And the central air unit in the home was off. So
and they did say it smelled.
It was off and it smelled. Yeah. So you had 3 decomposing bodies over the weekend. Obviously, it's not gonna smell pleasant. Now, my question was, you have the body has decomposed now a day, and then how is it being stored? How is it being handled? How accurate a finding are you going to get from a brain that now you waited several days to call? Has it been messed with by an autopsy? You know what I mean? Like, how, those are the specifics that I don't know, but I wonder, like, how accurate are these findings?
Well, because it seemed like he had said that Chris Nowinski had said that the CTE was severe. The brain damage from the concussions was very severe, correct?
That, yeah, the findings, I guess the brain was examined at a West Virginia university. I believe it was West Virginia University. So it wasn't like it was at Harvard or something. It was just like some if you hear Sandra, Nancy's sister, say it some community college in West Virginia. So she herself said she doesn't take those findings seriously because according to her, she never noticed anything wrong as far as memory, because what they said was that his CTE was that of an 80-year-old dementia patient or 80-year-old man with severe dementia.
But wouldn't you notice that? Like, how
You
could
would
he
think.
function
That's
day
what
to
I
day?
that's what I mean. And this is a guy who was on the road wrestling, who was making flights, booking hotels, getting rent-a-cars, doing all those things. And Chavo Guerrero, another one, who said he never noticed anything like that. The only thing that that Sandra said she thought was odd was that he started getting really paranoid, so that he was taking, for whatever reason, he has a home gym, but for whatever reason, he liked to go to the gym, to the actual gym in town, and he would start taking different routes to the gym. So he would take a different route to the gym than normal, than the regular way you would go, and then he'd take a different route home, and he would change cars often. He would never drive the same car to the gym. It was, and he would complain to her privately that he was paranoid of being followed. He didn't know if he was being followed, if he was being watched. So that was interesting. I found that interesting, but that was the only thing. And she said he was very sharp. He was very smart. Her words were, you could drop him off at any airport in the country and he could find his way through it and get from the terminal to the exit within like 5 minutes. So he was very sharp. So is that a guy who's like an 80-year-old dementia patient? Was, an 80-year-old man with severe dementia? It doesn't add up.
Yeah, it's weird.
So that's why I call into question the whole CTE thing. Again, I'm not a doctor, so I don't know, but that's the one where I'm just like, you have these people close to him who are around him all the time who say, we never noticed anything like that.
Wouldn't somebody have noticed? Or yeah, I don't know. It's just, it makes me feel like, was there damage? I'm sure there was.
I'm sure the guy had damage. I mean, if you saw the abuse he put himself through,
Yeah.
and the abuse he took, I mean, anybody that, especially at that time in wrestling, there was a lot of hard chair shots and guys were not putting their hands up and we're not protecting themselves. They were just taking them. One of his finishing moves was he would do a diving headbutt. And now you're not actually headbutting the guy head to head, but you are crashing down. A lot of times he'd miss. And yeah, I mean, that's a lot of impact. I mean, he had messed up his neck. He had to have neck fusion surgery in 2003. He was out for a year because of that. So his body took abuse.
Yeah.
So he had head trauma, no doubt about it. But was it that bad? And that's where I call into question. Was there decomposition? How was the brain preserved? These are things we don't know. And again, I don't know if it would matter anyway.
And I guess, yeah, because my question is there a difference between like when the brain becomes necrotic versus the CTE damage? I'm sure it's probably different showing up, but can it affect the results?
Again, not being an expert or having any knowledge in that field. Those are answers I don't know. And I don't know if what I'm asking is even a credible question, but it's what I'm thinking. And it's just a thing I think it should be asked.
Yeah.
But again, not having that knowledge, it's just one of those, we don't know. But figured we'd mention it. Now, another angle with the whole CTE thing, and this is, again, I'm not trying to discount that work because I think it's noble. I think there is a lot of validity to it, and they've made a lot of progress in that area, and they've done a lot to change the culture of professional wrestling since the Benoit incident. And it's like anything else. When you need money, you need funding to do your research. Are your findings going to come to a result that you need in order to continue your research? I'm not trying to attack the validity.
You're not accusing.
I'm not
either.
accusing.
You're
I'm
just
saying,
questioning these things.
Is that maybe why they came to this conclusion, or why it was publicized so much? Or was it a reason that maybe the WWE needed, or a conclusion they needed them to come to so that they could be in the clear for any wrongdoing and be off the hook for any of the wrongdoing here? Because after Benoit's death, the WWE was under fire. Everything about them was called into question. Their drug testing policy, all these other things, the the treatment of the wrestlers, the schedule of the wrestlers, the abuse the guys go through. Vince McMahon and his company were on the hot seat for a long time after this. Some people theorized that the business itself almost died. And it did. It definitely took a downturn. A lot of people got turned off on wrestling. A lot of fans stopped watching. I mean, I myself was pretty disgusted with it. I was in the business at the time. And I was just, it's just one of those things. A lot of people turned it off and never turned it back on again. So, ironically, Benoit almost killed the wrestling business that he loved and lived for, with his actions. But again, that's why I wondered, was that maybe why these findings were so dramatic? I guess. I don't know if they were exaggerated or not. Again, I don't know these things, but these are questions that I had. And I don't know if we're ever going to get the real answers. So wanted to bring that up.
Yeah. Another thing that was brought up was the grief Chris Benoit went through by losing one of his best friend, Eddie Guerrero.
Yeah.
And he actually lost several people over a short amount of time.
Yes. So Chris Benoit lost a lot of people close to him. Like you just said, in a short amount of time, he lost, I believe we have it printed out here. Thank you for doing that research, my lady. Ray Traylor, he was very close with Ray Traylor, otherwise known as the Big Boss Man. Yeah. And the Big Boss Man passed away September 22nd of 2004. That was one of Chris's buddies. They were pretty close. So that one hit him pretty hard. Shortly after Ray Traylor's death is when Chris had said that he's no longer going to do tribute shows, because up to that point, he'd been on several tribute shows. He was on the Brian Pillman Memorial Tribute Show. When Brian Pillman passed away, they had a wrestling, like a tribute show, but they had wrestlers from WCW, from WWF, from ECW, all on the same show, which at the time was unheard of, but all the three companies allowed their wrestlers to be on this tribute show to benefit the widow of Brian Pillman. So Benoit had done that show. He'd also been on the tribute show for Brian Hildebrand, who was a professional wrestling referee who had passed away from cancer. He'd been on that tribute show as well. And when Ray Traylor passed away, he told people, I'm done with tribute shows. I can't do them anymore because they're too sad. I don't want to do them anymore. I can't. So he swore off doing any more tribute shows. But after Ray Traylor passed away, the big one was Eddie Guerrero. Eddie Guerrero, they were best friends. They'd come up together in Japan and everything, and through WCW and everything, and they were the best of friends. So when Eddie Guerrero passed away on November 13th, 2005, from essentially it was a heart attack, heart failure.
That's 14 months later.
Yeah. That's the one that hit him really hard by all accounts. And that's when he started to become a little more withdrawn at home. And all his friends said that one hit him so hard. And actually it was Nancy's sister, Sandra, who suggested that Chris start writing in a journal, because that was something that she had done as a coping mechanism for when she had lost somebody close to her. And they went out, Nancy and Sandra bought him several journals and gave them to Chris. And I guess he started writing in a journal to Eddie as if he was talking to Eddie. And that like kind of helped him for several months. But according to her, he did it for several months, but then stopped. And that's when his behavior started getting more withdrawn again. So that's got to be tough, losing your best friend. I mean, I've lost my best friend. It is tough. It's very difficult. And obviously people cope in different ways. And again, it's a hard one. I mean, you don't really, there's no right or wrong way, I don't think. I mean, there's no right way, I guess. There's a lot of wrong ways, but there's no real right way. Everybody's got to just do it their own way. Yeah. So yeah, he apparently, I mean, Eddie was like the guy he confided in with everything. So that one hit him hard. And shortly after that, the man who trained him when he was in Japan, Black Cat, the guy who really took him under his wing and helped him out when he was in Japan, he passed away, and he passed away January 28th of 2006.
So just over 2 months after Eddie died.
Yeah. So just over 2 months after Eddie dies, he gets that news. So that's another one that's tough. And now when Chris and Nancy had moved to Georgia, when they moved into their town, there was a group of wrestlers that would hang out for a number of years. They would all get together when they were in town. A lot of the wrestlers' wives would hang out together. And around 2003, 2004, they kind of started, Nancy and Chris started getting kind of withdrawn from that. And it was essentially the time when Chris was really getting more popular and more recognized. So he wasn't going out as much. And so the only one of his friends that he would really, of that group of friends that he lived close to, that he would keep in touch with, was Johnny Grunge. Mike Durham was his real name, but his wrestling name was Johnny Grunge. He was part of a tag team called the Public Enemy. And February 16th of 2006, shortly after he gets the news of Black Cat dying, Johnny Grunge passed away. So that was his buddy. They were like neighbors. They lived very close to each other. And so he dies. So now that's another one. Good buddy that he confides in, that he lives near, that he hangs out with when he's at home and not on the road. Now he's dead. So that's a tough one. March 6th of 2007, Bad News Allen passes away. Now, that's a guy that Chris knew from his days in Calgary. Bad News was in the WWF for a short time in the late 80s, early 90s as Bad News Brown. So some people might know him better by that name. But that was another guy who Chris knew who passed away. Now, Bad News was in his 60s, so it wasn't like a younger guy that died. But still, it's a tough, when somebody and it's another person that, boom, again,
a year later
passes away. Yeah. June 15th of 2007, Sherry Martel, who was a pro wrestling manager and a ladies wrestler, she passed away. Now, she was closer with Nancy than she was with Chris. But again, another death. And this happened the week before Chris allegedly took his family and his life. So that's another one. Boom, right? Now, all of that emotional, like you think about it, your best friend dies. That's like so hard. That's got to be so tough. Now, these are just people he was close with. At this time, so many wrestlers were dying and passing away from drugs, really. But so many guys were dying at this time. It was like an epidemic. It was like a big deal. So you got to figure he knows a lot. Obviously, most of the guys that died, he either wrestled with them or was shared locker rooms with them. So he knows them. But the guys he's really close with are dying now. You got to wonder, am I next? Who's next? Kind of thing. It sucks for anybody. It just sucks knowing so many people that pass away that you're close to. And then when your best friend dies, then all of a sudden, just bang, one after the other, they just start coming.
And it felt like there was a lot of speculation that the emotional, the grief that he had, the trauma from losing his best friend. And then when you think about it, like in a short period of time, a matter of just a few years, so many friends, close friends, and just getting knocked off one by one. And it did feel like they were almost like they were saying maybe that had something to do with it as well. Almost like this on top of this, on top of this, on top of this, just one thing stacked on another, stacked on another, stacked on another.
And you got to figure, if you're going to say, you can't point to maybe one thing that did it. I would think you can't say, well, it's because of CTE. I would think that maybe that was a contributing factor, but you got to remember too, he was on mood stabilizing drugs. He was on drugs for depression. Because, understandably, the guy was depressed. He's losing all these people he loves and cares about. So, yeah, I can see it. So those are obviously they're not good for you, regardless of if you're depressed or not. No. Any kind of pharmaceutical is going to mess with your head anyway. And if your head is damaged from concussions, from just the abuse you're taking, probably sleep deprived from all the flying around everywhere. Pro wrestling, the travel schedule is not the healthiest thing for anybody.
Well, I was going to say, it's not like he has a stable life where it's kind of like he has his home base where he's home with his family all the time. He's traveling all the time. His work is putting his body through so much physical stress. He's in pain. It's not a stable lifestyle.
That's right. That's right. So you have that, and then you know, again, like the emotional distress and everything, and then obviously if there's issues going on at home as well, you have the stress of that. There was rumors of extramarital affairs that were perhaps happening as well. So you have the stress of maybe trying to keep that under wraps and hiding that from your spouse. Again, rumors. Nobody knows for sure except the people involved, but rumors that were out there. So if it went down the way they said it went down, I would think that it was probably an amalgamation of all these things. It's just a big, everything just kind of hit at the same time, one thing on top of the other, and finally it was it. He had it, and he snapped. That, I mean, if it went down that way,
because there were reports that Chris and Nancy were arguing.
Yeah, and they did. She had filed for divorce at one point, and she had also gotten a restraining order against him. That's public record. That was out there. That did happen, and that I believe was in 2003. Now, interestingly enough, in 2003 is when he was out with his neck injury. So you figure he's at home now a lot. He's hurt. He's injured. He's on the mend. Professional wrestling couples are interesting. It's very rare that you find a couple that lasts, because the performer is on the road so much that he's only the spouse gets used to only having them around a certain amount of time, and the performer only gets used to being home a certain amount of time. So when they're all of a sudden now home all the time, it's almost like they have to get used to each other again. So maybe there's a lot of fighting and conflicts. Who knows? We don't know the ins and outs of their personal lives, but obviously something happened there. Get used to
routine.
Sure.
And then your routine is messed up, and that can throw you off. Yeah.
So your kids now have you around all the time, and you're around your kids all the time where you're not usually. So now you're getting to see how they are all the time, not just the 1 or 2 days a week that you're home. You know what I mean? So it's these things these little things that people don't think about that take place that can really add up and affect a person's psyche. So anyway, that happened. There was a restraining order. Apparently there was a physical altercation, and Nancy got the restraining order, filed for divorce, but they did reconcile. Chris, I guess, moved out for a couple of weeks, but ended up moving back in. Like I said, they reconciled and they were together until the end. So
now, one other thing that was reported but not true was that the cell phones went missing.
That was another thing that was out there on the internet, that the cell phones were missing. These text messages were sent to these wrestlers, but the phones were never found. I don't know why that was ever out there or how that ever got out there, but the phones were found. They were right next to him. They were right next to his body.
Are people doing it to create a story? That's, I don't know.
Did
false information get put out and people just went with it?
That's the only thing I can think of, because I don't know how that story got started, because they were found. They were right next to him. So, and that's in the police reports.
And then there were different reports about how his son was killed. And I mean, just thinking about that is gruesome. It's tough because it's like, who really wants to go over those details? But there were different reports of what had happened. And one of it was that Benoit used his finishing move, one of his finishing moves. And it's, I don't know, it's just crazy.
Yeah. I don't know. I hate talking about this.
I know. I just kind of feel like, I look at it like, why would you want to speculate any of that? Regardless of what it is, this poor baby lost his life. Like, dude, just leave it. It's like, just leave it be. Like, let the baby go in peace.
So let's not talk about that.
Yeah, because I just feel like it's just like all these different stories, and I just, as a person, as a mom, maybe just look at it like, do we really want to know the details if it's not going to give us an answer? That's just how I
Well, the
look at it.
details are out. The actual details, the coroner's report is
Yeah.
available.
But when you speculate those kind of things,
the speculation was okay. I'm going to say it anyway, because just to say how you said it and not get into it is kind of, that's cheap. Sorry. No offense. Rumors were that the child was suffocated. That was one report that was out there, that he was smothered with a pillow. Another was that he was choked and strangled. And the other was that a variation of his move was the crippler crossface. It was essentially a crossface where you put the forearms across the face and the throat, and you'd rear back and you'd choke.
Just thinking of that is horrifying.
It is. It's horrifying. Now, there was no marks on the boy's face, according to the coroner's report. So there was no bruising. So a lot of people said, well, that couldn't be the wrestling finishing move, because he puts the forearms across the face. There would have been some kind of bruising. However, the coroner's report also said the nature of the injuries, the nature of the death
didn't coincide with that.
Coincided more so not with suffocation or strangulation, but with some form of that happening. The boy was found face down on his pillow. I speculate Benoit maybe had him a pillow between his arm and the boy's face.
I don't even want to think about
I know. I'm just telling you, that's the only thing I can think of. And I hate to even think of it. Now, yeah.
But the Dark Side of the Ring episode said that Daniel was given Xanax and he was suffocated. So who knows?
Who knows?
I just look at it at that point. What does it matter? Speculating those details.
Yeah, but again, it's more of that, just the differing information that's out there.
But it's almost like they're sensationalizing it, and I just find that disgusting.
I'm with you.
And there's just a lot of timeline events that are really shady that don't. I don't know. It just seems a little off. There's different reports about when each person died.
Yeah, there's reports that they all died on Friday night, that Friday night, and that they were all dead for 3 days until the police found them on Monday. Then some reports have Nancy dying first, Daniel dying shortly after her on Friday night, and Chris staying with them all weekend and taking his own life on Sunday. Now, the official reports have Nancy dying Friday evening and Daniel dying Saturday evening and Chris dying on Sunday. That's the official report. Now, I would presume that is, they come to that through lividity, right? Autopsies through and figuring out time of death that way. So I would go with the official report rather than the different message boards and different websites that post stories and their own facts that they have quote unquote found. But that's just me.
But then the timeline in the WWE is also a little shady as well.
The shady thing with the WWE, and I mean, this could be a podcast all on its own just on this. The timeline that's shady there is, when did they know? Because again, like we said, they did that tribute show.
And that was Monday night.
Monday night. The bodies are found that afternoon. And then shortly after, they go, several hours later, they do a live Monday Night Raw tribute show. So when did they know that it was being investigated as a murder-suicide? They say they didn't know until it was on the news at 10 o'clock that evening. That's their official story.
And they're sticking to it.
Right. Now, there's a lot of people and a lot of evidence that says otherwise. And we can get into a whole discussion on that. Carl DeMarco, who is the president of WWE Canada, called Chris Benoit's mother essentially to express condolences for her loss. And that was at 4 o'clock Eastern, 4:30 Eastern on that Monday afternoon.
Eastern time. Yeah.
He realized, the way it was, because I actually read this account in a book about the case. He started off by saying, when she answered the phone, he started off by saying, "I just want you to know, Chris was one of my great friends. He was such a great guy." And she stopped him and said, wait, why are you telling me this? And at that point, he realized, oh, she doesn't know. Like, she doesn't know her son and her grandson and daughter-in-law are dead. Like, she has no idea.
Awkward.
So he said, you know what? I'm sorry. I'm going to have to call you back. Let me call you back in a few minutes. And he got off the phone with her because he didn't want to be the one to break it to her. So he calls apparently the WWF office or WWE office, and a detective called her and told her shortly after. A detective that was investigating the crime scene called and let her know that her son, her grandson, and her daughter-in-law were all dead, and it was being investigated as a murder-suicide. This is at about 4:45 Eastern time. And right after that, Carl DeMarco called her back. So there must have been some back and forth going on. He knew, okay, she got the call. Now I can call her back. So this is the head of WWE Canada. So if he knows, you've got to think that Vince McMahon and the rest of the WWE knows. Because if he spoke to a police detective or somebody that was in contact with a detective, you'd got to think Vince knows, right? So at that point, we'd have to go based on that alone, that they know that this is a murder-suicide or it's being investigated as such. So they knew before they did this tribute show.
And my question is, I thought about this. What is the point of not telling people? And I thought maybe
you mean not telling
people the full truth about what happened, not saying not only is Chris and his family dead, but it's believed that he killed them. He killed his family and then himself. And I thought about it and I thought, okay, well, maybe just finding out that somebody you work with, somebody you care about, somebody you're friends with is going to be hard enough to take. So do you really just want to throw all that at them? So maybe just kind of be like, just let them process that they're gone before we give them that additional information.
So you think that your thinking is that Vince McMahon.
I'm trying to rationalize it.
I just want to make sure I'm getting it clear and right. You think that he decided, knowing the information that he knew, the little information, because I mean, again, this is just new, but the police immediately must know, okay, this is probably what happened, because you can tell. I'm not a police officer, but I would imagine you could know if this body's decomposed over a couple of days in a hot house, and then this one over here is maybe not as much decomposed, but still more decomposed than the one that you found
on the
hanging.
Circumstances.
But you would think that if Benoit's body is less decomposed than the other two, that it's kind of obvious what happened.
That might not be as obvious.
I'm just saying.
I know.
I'm making an educated hypothesis. It's a guess, but I'm guessing. This is me coming up with my theory now. So you would think that that's why they're coming to that conclusion and saying, this is how we're investigating it right now. Now, obviously, you're investigating, so you may find evidence that says, actually, this is not what happened. It was this, but there was no sign of any forced entry. There was no break-in or anything like that. So immediately, just based on that, initially, you're going to say, well, there was no forced entry, so it had to have been somebody that was already in the house that did this. And you're looking around and you see, okay, this one is strangled, tied up, and beaten. This one is a child, and the child couldn't have hung the big 220-pound wrestler. The child couldn't have done this to his mother and then to himself. So it makes sense that this is what happened just by looking at just by initial look, just by looking at it.
Based off the evidence that's there.
Right. Without going into full forensics and everything, that would be the initial thought.
Do we know when the staff of WWE, the wrestlers, were told?
So apparently that afternoon, as soon as they got word that they were all dead, Vince McMahon had a meeting in the arena with the talent. So he called them all to the ring, to ringside area. He got up on the ring and addressed them all and said, "We got word that Chris and his wife and his son were all found dead in their home." He
So-
didn't give any details
Yeah,
because
so-
he didn't really have any.
Yeah. So what I'm saying is they found out those details and saying, maybe we'll wait till tomorrow. Maybe, once they found that out before breaking that news. I don't know. I'm just
Well-
trying to think of
well-
a rational, logical reason.
He gives this news, but I would presume that, again, now from the way I understand it, the person from the security company that they had hired was in contact with them back and forth because he was on site with the police. So if this person is on site with the police and speaking with the detectives that are there and getting information, obviously he's going to call when they find the bodies. He's going to let them know right away. But then as he's getting word that, it looks like there's no forced entry. We don't see anything. We've cleared the house. There's no one else here. There's no broken windows, no doors that were jimmied open, nothing. It looks like he did it. We're going to investigate as murder-suicide.
Mhm.
Obviously, this information is getting back to Vince McMahon or the WWE officials that are in contact with this security guy. Now, you think they're not going to tell Vince? You think Vince doesn't know every single thing that's going on?
I'm not arguing that.
No, I know, but I'm just saying he had to have known. Maybe he didn't know right when he told the wrestlers at the meeting, but he definitely knew when Carl DeMarco knew, or before Carl DeMarco knew, because Carl DeMarco was the president of WWE Canada.
But my point is, so he has to inform the wrestlers of this.
Right.
And then he finds out more of the details of what it really is. So I'm just trying to say, like, maybe he didn't want to just make it worse by saying, oh, and we just found out he killed his family and then himself.
Fine. That's fine if you think that's, but
I'm not saying I think that.
Okay.
I'm just saying
you're trying to rationalize. I get it. That's fine. But why, even if that's the case, even if that's what he's thinking, again, I don't know what the guy was thinking. Who knows? I mean, you're getting that information. You're not going to be thinking straight anyway. That's a traumatizing thing for everybody. A shocking thing, So who knows what he was thinking? But regardless, he definitely could have canceled a tribute show and done something differently. Why did he go on and have a 3-hour tribute to a guy that he knows probably killed his wife and son and then himself?
Because they had to fill the time gap somehow.
That's where it's like, dude, okay, what you said before, okay, we don't tell the wrestlers just yet because let them process the fact that he's gone and we'll let that information come out slowly or whatever. Okay, fine, maybe we can rationalize that. I'll give you that one. But why do you go on and do a 3-hour tribute and allow your wrestlers to go and you encourage them to go and sit down in front of the camera and give a tearful, obviously tearful, because they're emotional, testimonial of Chris Benoit? That's
going to be difficult. Just finding out somebody you cared about, one of your friends, is gone and his family is gone, and then to have to talk about it on camera. Well, it's kind of fucked up.
They didn't have to talk about it.
I know, but still.
But if the camera was there, it was optional. They weren't forced to do it. But if they wanted to, they could go and give some words about Chris Benoit. That was so. Yeah, it's fucked up, absolutely. But that's what happened. And again, Vince knew that WWF or E, excuse me, they knew at least at 4:30 in the afternoon that it was being investigated as a murder-suicide.
Even 5:30, even 6, they still went forward. So I guess my question is, do they think it's just fill the time gap, go along with the plan, and we'll say what we have to say tomorrow?
We'll deal with it later, maybe.
Yeah.
That may be what happened. That's the only thing I can think of that makes any sense. But it's still like, and we spoke about this earlier. I don't know what you do in that situation. I don't know what you do. I've never been the head of a $1 billion company. I've never been in charge of that many people. This guy's got television contracts, advertisers to worry about, stockholders, because he's a publicly traded company. He has so many things that he has to answer for and answer to. So you and I criticizing his decision making, or anybody else for that matter, we are just criticizing from the outside. We've never walked a mile in Vince McMahon's shoes, so we don't know the responsibilities and the people that he has to answer to and the things that he has to answer for in making the decisions he makes. I will never have that much stress or responsibility in my life. I would never want that much.
And again, we're just trying to look at it at all the different angles, all
Right.
the different viewpoints. We're not saying one is right, one is wrong. We agree with one or another. We're
Right.
just trying to think of
trying to give as many aspects of this and trying to get people to think about things that maybe you normally wouldn't think of because your emotions take over.
Yeah. Things just to question, just.
But that's the thing. I don't know what I would do in that situation. I don't know what the right answer is. What do you do? Do you just cancel it and have nothing on? I don't know. But it was definitely controversial that they went ahead and they did a tribute to a guy who they knew probably murdered his wife and son and then killed himself.
Or allegedly. And there was something else weird because the pay-per-view was the night before. Right. And somebody went on Wikipedia.
Yeah, this was a weird one.
Yeah. So what actually happened?
So I saw this that night when Chris Benoit when it was announced that he wasn't going to be on the pay-per-view. Somebody went on Wikipedia, and I have it here somewhere now. I apologize. Going to give me a minute to fumble through here to find it.
Well, you had known that Chris Benoit, it's announced he's not going to be in the pay-per-view.
Right.
So you just were curious and you decided, I'm just going to look it up, see if I can find something out.
I did.
That's how you came across the Wikipedia.
I went because I wanted to see, is there news about this on because the WWE is not going to tell you the exact reason. And they said he's dealing with a family issue. So I was like, oh, I wonder what that is. I wonder if there's anything about it online. So I did. I quickly went on and looked, and I found on the Wikipedia that the quote was, Chris Benoit was replaced by Johnny Nitro for the match at Vengeance, as Benoit was not there due to personal issues stemming from the death of his wife, Nancy. That was the quote. So I saw that and went, oh shit, his wife died? Oh wow, geez, I wonder what happened there. But again, this wasn't reported anywhere else. It was just on this Wikipedia. So I did look around and I was like, I couldn't find anything else about it anywhere. But it slowly started showing up on wrestling sites. So there were some wrestling sites, news sites and things that had that on there.
And where did that post come from?
Stamford, Connecticut is where the IP address of the poster was traced to. What else is in Stamford, Connecticut? WWE headquarters. So that right there, just that started fueling all kinds of speculation and rumors and started getting all kinds of crazy conspiracy theories that were coming out.
And because one of the conspiracy theories was that Vince McMahon hired somebody to kill them.
Right.
What's the motive there?
It's the craziest one, but that's where that stemmed from, was because of that. And now the police did go and question this person that, like I said, they traced the IP address. They found the person. It was like some 19-year-old kid who just saw on the pay-per-view that Benoit was missing the show. And he was a troll. He was an internet troll that apparently would go and troll all kinds of Wikipedia pages and all kinds of different genres. It would just, because at the time, and I think you still can, anybody can sign up and get a Wikipedia account and post stuff on anything. I have a Wikipedia page, and I mean, I've never put anything on it, but I look at some of the stuff and I'm like, that's not true. Like, that's not what? Where'd they get this? What the hell is that? That's on my Wikipedia page.
You just don't care enough to get an account.
I don't care enough to fix it. Whatever. It's whatever.
Yeah.
But this is what this kid would do. And he was obviously pulled into the police station and they questioned him. And he just said, I was just trolling.
I was just being an asshole.
I was being an asshole. I was just guessing. I don't know anything. And because they thought this kid knew something. They thought he has to have information. How does he? Because it's just too spot on.
On
It's
the
too
pay-per-view,
lucky.
did they say Benoit wasn't wrestling due to a family emergency?
I think that's what was said, but
Because
I don't remember
one could
exactly what it
imagine
was.
if they said, oh, due to a family emergency, this guy could be like, okay, well, what's a family emergency? Well, he's married. So I could be like, oh, his wife died, because that's considered a family emergency. And that's like a terrible thing to joke about. But the fact that he was right.
He ended up just being spot on with his troll.
Well, I was thinking, oh, maybe he's psychic or something and doesn't realize
He was
it.
an internet troll. That's
Yeah.
all he was. He was an internet troll. He got, I hate to say, but he got lucky with one of his posts. He got it right. But he didn't know anything in that. But that, from that, just that little bit right there,
It's still strange,
was
though.
the seed. It is strange, but that was the seed right there that spawned all these different conspiracy theories. Now, another thing that when we were mentioning the deaths, and I wanted to talk about this really quick too, just to make mention of it, because you were talking about coincidences and it being eerie. Chris's tag team partner that he started out with, Biff Wellington, died that Friday that he allegedly killed Nancy. He had a heart attack and died up in Calgary. That gentleman's body was not discovered until Saturday. So did Chris, you can't say that this was one of the catalysts for the events that took place, because he had already killed, or Nancy had already been killed. But it's just another one. It's just an eerie coincidence. The guy he starts with in Calgary, one of his at one time, one of his closest friends also dies that weekend. And then Chris dies the fall, or, that same weekend, Chris dies. Just very eerie how that happens. Right. And now, listening to the Jericho podcast, apparently those two had gone into business together in Calgary and had a falling out because their business had failed or something over money. Jericho didn't know the specifics. He didn't get into it, but he said there was heat there. They did not like each other and they did not get along. So I don't know if he even would have, I'm sure he would have cared, but it probably wouldn't have, maybe not have hit him as hard if he had found out and it had happened prior to the events of that weekend. I don't know, but it would have been another one that could have piled on had he found out.
Yeah. It's just weird.
Yeah. And again, we don't even know if he even knew, because I know that Chris Jericho had texted him that Saturday, never got a response, but texted him, hey, I heard Beef Wellington had died. I didn't know if you knew or had heard. And apparently Dave Meltzer, who is a prominent wrestling journalist, he's a wrestling newsletter writer, also emailed Benoit that weekend, that Saturday, when he got the news that Wellington had died, to see if Chris had heard. He wanted to send his condolences and say, I didn't know if you'd heard. And he also never heard back from Benoit. So obviously they know later why they didn't hear back from him. But so did he check his email? Did he check his text message and know? We'll never know.
So another conspiracy theory was Kevin Sullivan hired somebody to kill them.
Yeah, and this one was just absurd on its face, but it all stems from it's wrestling fans who are passionate, and that's why we love them, right? But they're passionate and they're looking for answers. They're looking for reasons. Why would this happen? So the conspiracy theories that Kevin Sullivan hired people to go out and kill Chris Benoit because he was mad that Chris took his wife.
How many years later?
Right. And also that Kevin Sullivan was a devil worshiper, so it had to be him because it was a sacrifice. That's why the whole family was killed. Kevin Sullivan, as we said earlier, was not a devil worshiper.
It was a gimmick.
It was a wrestling gimmick.
Yeah.
The guy was fine. He's not. Anyway, but that was another crazy conspiracy theory that's still out there. You still see people saying it. Come on.
And again, I think people are just trying to find a reason, something to be like, because you can't even fathom.
That's the thing. Yeah.
What had happened.
Yeah.
So they're just trying to find some way to rationalize it so it's not as bad as it is. And one other conspiracy theory I thought was really interesting was Chris Benoit spent time in Japan.
A lot of time in Japan. Yeah.
Yeah. And there were conspiracy theories that the Yakuza
Yes.
had a hit on him.
Yes. So this is another theory that, again, it's a theory. Is it impossible? Nothing is impossible. I'll never say it's impossible. Is it probable? Probably not, but I could see where some people might think this. What were you going to say?
I was going to say, let's just play along with this theory, right?
Let's play along with it.
He started showing signs of paranoia,
Yes.
thinking somebody was following him.
Right.
So if somebody was out to get him, that could coincide. Maybe he wasn't crazy. Maybe somebody was really out to get him and he knew it. Maybe he made a shady deal. Biff Wellington died the same weekend. They were in business together. Did they make a bad business deal? They had a falling out. Did they owe money? Maybe they met the Yakuza and ended up owing them. I'm just playing along with this to fuel the conspiracy theory.
Well, the theory is that, and the reason this theory came about was because nobody could explain why the child was also killed. Nobody could explain why. And again, because Daniel would have been cared for. The Toffolonis, who were Nancy's family, her sister and her parents, would have taken him in. They were all extremely close. They all loved Daniel. And Chris knew that. He knew that there would have been somebody. So why would he kill his son when he could have just killed his wife? Okay, he messed up and just taken his own life. Why would he kill his son? So people were theorizing that. And these were actually people that are kind of intelligent, I would think, that you'd think would have a clue. And they said that it would make sense that the whole family gets taken out if it's a mob type hit, if there's money owed, if there was perceived disrespect that had happened or occurred. So the speculation was that Benoit either disrespected somebody in the Yakuza or owed them money, something along those lines, and this was their way of collecting the debt.
And my question is the Yakuza just the only Japanese mafia that's out there? Because I feel like everyone throws that name out. I don't know.
I know that they're very, I don't know if they still are, but at the time they were very prominent in Japanese wrestling. They would show up. There were a lot of the American wrestlers would have what are called sponsors, and there would be a Yakuza member who, if they liked the American wrestler, the gaijin as they were called, if they liked that American wrestler, they'd take him out to dinner. They'd get him drinks. Give him
I was
women,
just curious where that
kind of thing.
particular group came from, how their
the Yakuza, they were very, very much involved in a lot of the Japanese pro wrestling scene. I don't know if they financed or what. I don't know the inner workings, but I know I heard a lot of stories that they were definitely prominent. They were definitely there a lot at a lot of these events, and a lot of the wrestlers knew them. So that's the speculation. Maybe the Yakuza put a hit out on him for whatever reason. Maybe he disrespect somebody's girlfriend or wife or something. Who knows? That's the theory. But the reason being because of the boy dying as well, because there was no reason for it.
He lost his mind.
That's a reason. That is a reason, but we're going with the theory that Yakuza thing is something that happened. Now, is it something that could have happened? Absolutely, that could have happened. And you laid it out pretty well. He started getting paranoid. Why? Because he knew maybe he knew somebody was out to get him. He knew maybe he had a debt.
He knew that
he had to pay that he couldn't pay, or he didn't want to pay, or something. And he knew that, oh shit, they're coming to get me. Somebody called him maybe and told him or whatever. We don't know. But he's getting paranoid. And again, that could be the CTE. If it was as severe as they say, it could be, who knows? We don't know. It could be the medication he was on. We don't know. We have no idea. We were not there. So we don't know. But could it be something that happened? To me, that's probably the most plausible of the conspiracy theories. That's probably the most plausible. Do I believe that that's what happened? That's not my opinion, but if I was going to say that I had to pick one, gun to my head, that's the most plausible one.
If we had to pick one conspiracy theory, that one would fit the best, I guess.
It would, and how you said with the tag partner also dying that same weekend. Yeah, Biff Wellington dying the same weekend, then being in business together, falling out over money problems. Now I don't know what their business was. I don't know how much money was involved. I have no idea. But just knowing that that was something, could it play into that conspiracy theory? Sure, you could connect the dots and have it make sense.
Mm-hmm.
But
yeah.
Anyway, so I don't know. There's so much information on this. We've already gone 2 hours. My goodness. Yeah. Wow. Your thoughts. What do you think happened that weekend? Again, it's a guess because nobody really knows for sure.
As much as I don't want to think about a parent harming their family, harming their child, especially, it just, looking over everything, I could see somebody just going through a lot of stuff, having a brain injury, having multiple concussions, having injuries, being in pain, a lot of stuff going on. And just like I said, one thing piling on top of another, on top of another. And, there were reports that him and his wife were fighting. They'd have arguments. There was accusations of cheating, about being controlling, being manipulative. So you just don't know what's going to make a person snap.
Yeah. And that was something else that apparently Nancy had confided in the neighbor, the same neighbor that had found the bodies that day, had confided in her a lot. They spent a lot of time together and had confided in the neighbor that Chris was becoming very controlling, was becoming very abusive emotionally and mentally to her. There were also a lot of text messages that are public record that you can look at where Nancy is telling him she can't take his mental abuse and that kind of thing. So there's a lot of little tidbits that you find here and there that show that there was definitely some strain. And again, we have that there was a restraining order and she did file for divorce at one point.
And so, wasn't there reports like she had some drinking issues?
Yes, she actually confided in her neighbor that she was drinking too much and also taking Chris's medication, his mood medicine, Xanax, Zoloft, I believe.
Which I don't think goes good with alcohol.
You're not really supposed to mix those two?
I don't think so.
But apparently she had been abusing those two, according to the neighbor. Again, I don't know for sure, but according to the neighbor, and that she had said that she needs to start walking more so she can try to get in more shape and stop drinking so much and that kind of thing. So
obviously there are problems there.
Right.
And the only thing that I can imagine having to look at it from an outsider perspective is, let's say Chris just lost it. He lost his shit for whatever reason. And he did that stuff to his wife. And then maybe he's trying to cope with what to do. He just killed his wife and the mother of his son. And then he has his son not knowing what to do. Maybe he's thinking, well, we'll all be together. Let's all just die together. Right. I'm not saying that it's logical. I'm just saying when somebody's not in their right mind, they don't make logical decisions. And
you're right.
Yeah. They so it's not going to make sense to people. And I don't know. I just, as much as we want to believe that somebody couldn't do that, unfortunately, there are horrible things that happen. People do terrible things, whether it's because they're terrible people or because they just are under the influence of something, or they're going through something and they snap, they're not in their right mind, whatever it may be. They do things and then sometimes they realize they can't take it back. And then they just make it even worse.
Could be. Yeah.
So what do you think?
I think it went down essentially the way it was reported. We did say allegedly before, but I do think that that's most likely what occurred. And yeah, I think it was just like I said before, it was just the combination of all these different things that happened to this guy. It was a cumulative effect. It wasn't just one thing. It was
Mhm.
all these things. And yeah, he probably just lost it and had a fit of rage. And I mean, the thing to me though that was kind of disturbing. Well, the whole thing's disturbing, but the way that she was found,
Mhm.
I mean, she was tied up. Like, that was I don't know if that's premeditation or necessarily, but it was cruel for sure.
And I mean, one
And
could try to look at it like, what if she was attacking him and he did that to stop her? But I don't know. I'm not saying it's right. I'm just trying to think of different reasons why somebody might do that,
yeah,
other than just,
trying,
just
yeah,
for that horrific, for doing it.
yeah, I perhaps, I mean, trying to look at it from every perceivable angle, I guess you could say maybe that's why he tied her. I don't know. But she was brutalized. So if that was, let's say that was the case, and that's how it started, well, that's not how it ended.
Exactly. Oh, exactly.
So she was brutalized. I mean, and essentially she was, the way she was tied up, it was said that he essentially was choking her out while standing on her back and pulling.
Yeah.
That's just, it's brutal,
It's fucked up.
And
Yeah.
she was beat up pretty bad too. So
one of the takeaways I just want to share is mental health is really important. And we all go through shit. And I think it's really important that anyone dealing with issues, no matter how big or small it is, it's important to talk to somebody about it. It's important to, it's okay to ask for help, talk about it, do something. Or if you know somebody, because it almost seems like there's a lot of covering going on too.
Yeah.
The boy's covering for his friend. And as much as you want to help your friends and cover for them so everything seems fine, sometimes you have to look for those flags and talk to them and be there for them and help them. So if you're going to take anything from this incident, it's just take care of your mental health. It seemed like he knew not everything was right. He was having issues. If somebody reaches out to you like that, try to do something, try to point them in the direction or listen if you can. But especially if you're going through something, talk about it, talk to somebody about it, ask for help, because it's just, this was a horrific incident. And it's like, you don't want to see anyone go through that.
Yeah. So I definitely think that it went down the way that they said, like I was saying before, but I can't fathom ever being in that state of mind. So it's very, it's tough.
Most normal people can't.
Most people can't. Yeah.
Yeah.
Now I think it's important too that we should probably also just briefly discuss that. Like I said before, it did almost bring down the WWE. It almost ended it. It's true.
Mhm.
That did happen. There was so many different investigations going on. A lot of doctors were called into question. A lot of their practices were called into question because a lot of people were getting steroids. The drug wellness policy that WWE had instituted after Eddie Guerrero passed away was essentially, it was there for looks for the most part, because it was strict, but you could get around a lot of things. And there was a lot of doctors writing prescriptions for things that they probably should have been writing prescriptions for. And there were different ways that guys were beating the drug tests and passing the drug tests and things like that. So after this happened, it got much more strict. The WWE did take actions they started preventing chair shots to the head. So you stopped seeing people getting hit in the head with chairs. So that was a positive change for sure. They started banning certain moves. So guys couldn't do moves. They couldn't do a lot of things where trauma to the head was as much of a risk. They also started instituting concussion testing. So from what I understand, they were doing regular testing on the talent at events, whether or not they had any kind of a head injury or anything like that. If somebody got any kind of a head injury or got their bell rung or anything like that, They were immediately given what's called a concussion impact test. It's just a number of different things. They ask you questions and have you do some different math problems and things like that to see how sharp you are. How accurate those are, I don't know, but they were trying. They were trying to do something. We know there was a popular wrestler named Daniel Bryan who was forced to retire because of concussions and was cleared by several doctors, and WWE did not allow him to come back for several years because they did not want to take the chance of having a guy have a really bad head injury. So we know that they were serious about the health of the guys. They really did start turning it around and started trying to care for the well-being of the talent more. You saw a lot of guys over the years, matches get stopped because somebody got hurt. Whereas in the past, if somebody got hurt,
You work through it.
You work through it. The school, that I came up in, you got hurt, you just went with it, man. I broke my ankle in a match. I finished that match. I broke my ankle in another match. I finished that match. You work through your injuries.
You got a concussion during a match and you wrestled. You were unconscious and you still wrestled.
That's the school that I came up in, and that's how everybody did it. You got hurt, you kept going until you did your job, you finished what you were supposed to do, and then you dealt with your injury after, but you got through that match. Well, they stopped doing that now. I mean, now you see if somebody gets hit by accident and they're bleeding, the ref immediately puts gloves on and goes and checks them. They stop the match, they have the guy come out, they fix the cut. They really are it for me, coming from the school I came from and what I grew up with and what I like in wrestling, it messed up wrestling for me as far as the excitement of it, the flow of a match and that kind of thing. But you can see that they're doing it because they are trying to be serious about taking care of these guys and gals. So I'm going to give it to them for that. That is a positive change that was made for the well-being of the guys and the girls. The travel schedule, the shows, they don't run as many shows. Now, is that necessarily because of the health and well-being, or is that just because they're maybe not drawing as many people at live events? I don't know, but that's another change that has happened since this tragedy. So the guys and gals are not on the road as much. So the travel schedule has gotten better. They're getting paid a lot more money too, but the company's also making more money from TV rights fees. So a lot of positive changes have happened since this, and you've noticed the culture in professional wrestling has changed a lot. Look at the guys on TV now. They're not as big and muscular because steroids are probably still there. They're always going to be there. Anytime you have any kind of athletic competition or anything where cosmetic looks are valuable and mean something, they're always going to be there, but they're not as prominent. There's not as much emphasis put on people to look a certain way. You still got to look like an athlete, but you don't have to be jacked to the gills. Pain pills and those type of things are not as prominent now. That culture has changed a lot since 2007. So we can look at, they've taken steps to ensure that this kind of stuff does not happen again. So they have made positive changes. So some good, you could say, came from this. It's just sad and unfortunate that it had to be something like this that had to happen in order for those changes to occur.
But that's the way it is in life. It's like, it almost feels like you have to wait for something horrible to happen before people make changes.
Sad but true.
Yeah.
Sad but true.
Yeah.
But I had to make sure that we ended on that note, that there has been, things have gotten better for the guys and gals. There are definitely more opportunities. There's more people that are in wrestling now than there ever have been before, and more people that are in wrestling that never would have gotten a shot pre-2007 than there ever were before. So you can look at it like that. And
trying to end this episode
try
on
to
a
end
positive
on a high note.
Yeah, because this was kind of a little down,
Yeah, it was. I did a lot of research on this one.
I'm usually the one doing research, or we tag team it. Alex did like all the research on this.
And yeah, and it was incredibly frustrating because, again, so much different information, so many different details. And again, this happened in the time where the internet now had become a thing, and anybody could post something on the internet, and cable news shows were a thing. And it seemed like everybody, like I said before, all these wrestlers of the past looking for 5 more minutes in the spotlight were coming out of the woodwork and dropping all these different things that they had no knowledge of, but were all of a sudden getting run with. And so you have all these different things that were out there and they're still out there. And it's really unfortunate because so much misinformation out there. And
And that's why we always say,
it
do
was
your own
hard.
research.
Yeah, it was hard doing the research for this one because you know, typically, how does somebody do research on something? If they're looking to get information on something, what do they go into the search engine?
Mhm.
I don't use Google, but that's typically what everybody uses is Google. They jump on Google, they type in something, and the first thing that pops up, that's what they click on and read. And you take that as the facts. It ain't the facts 9 times out of 10. I hate to break the news to you, but I'm looking at, I read a book. I listened to several podcasts with different people that were close to Benoit. We watched the documentary together that they did on it, The Dark Side of the Ring. I read multiple articles. I went back, I watched news clips.
And we've said it before. We try to find, like, okay, we find an article. Is there anything that agrees with it? Is there anything that conflicts with it or opposes it? So we're trying to look at all the different aspects and where the information is coming from. How reliable is the information? So there's a number of aspects when we do our research that, you know, we're trying to just look at it from all different angles, what makes the most sense and what is it that's being put out there. And and then all we can do is kind of say our 2 cents about what we think, because at the end of the day, nobody really knows anything.
Yeah, we're trying to be responsible with our research, I guess is probably the best way of putting it, and trying to be as open about our research as we can be. I'll tell you, I found 5 different things about one thing. I don't know which one's true. You know, we'll tell you that kind of stuff, but we try, like you said, we try to get it from every aspect that we can think of. And there's probably more aspects out there that we never would have thought of, but that's what we try to do. I feel like when we do our research on stuff, we're almost approaching it from the way journalists should be doing research and writing stories. That's how we try to approach this stuff.
Look for yourself.
But exactly.
Don't just take our word for it. We're giving you some information, but, you know, if you care about it, if you're interested in it, go do your own research and see what you find. And, you know, maybe you'll find something different. And if so, that's great.
You might find something that we didn't find or whatever. That's why we like to put as many links in the show notes as we can for some of the resources that we use. And obviously I can't put every link of every bit of information, but
we try to
drop the nuggets, especially, you know, when we tell you. So yeah, definitely go check out some of those podcasts I talked about. The Dark Side of the Ring special that they did on Chris Benoit. That was also very informative. But yeah, this was a tough one for sure.
Yeah. And I'm like, man, the night before my birthday, and now I'm like, So on another bright note, since tomorrow is my birthday, well, when you're listening, it'll already have passed, but go to my website, tarotbymonique.com, or my Etsy shop, Wonders by Monique, and get 15% off an Organite Dragon and a free Dragon Oracle reading. See, I'm trying to bring the happiness back, bring the positivity.
So out of place here, but
I know
but do it anyway. Why not?
I'm like, okay, try to go to something happy. Go to my happy place. Go to my happy place.
All right. Well, if you've got nothing else to add,
I just want to thank everyone for listening. We love you. We appreciate you.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you, friends, for hanging in there with us. We appreciate you. If you're coming in once in a while just for topics that you find interesting, or if you're with us every week, we appreciate you nonetheless. Thank you so much for tuning in and listening. And until next time, I am the Golden Greek Alex Arion. I've been joined as always by my wife, the beautiful, lovely, gorgeous, amazing Monique.
And you've been listening to the Homewrecker podcast.